That's your time. Yeah, Julie. Yeah, that's you.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. So, good morning. I was good morning. Yes. So happy to meet you again for this first session of this afternoon, which will be on the modeling and simulation. I'm happy to introduce again my friend Julie, who will have the first talk, and she will present herself again if needed.
Might be secondly.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so I'm going to present some work that was done in collaboration between Carol, Adam, Elise, and myself. Unfortunately, Carol couldn't be here today. Carol, Elise, and I are all from the same university, but we're working in different laboratories. So Carol and I are from the LIG, which is Vinova Informatics Laboratory, and Elise is from PACT, which is a social science laboratory, and she's a geographer. We've also been working with some people from REMIT, so that's Melbourne University in Australia. You'll see the connection, well, you probably get it in the title anyway. So first of all, just a bit of context about bushfires in the state of Victoria in Australia. Bushfires happen most summers in Victoria in Australia, and so the government issues regular awareness campaigns to the population. And what they say, what they promote, is that people should either prepare, stay and defend their property, or they should leave early. Okay, so that's what the government wants people to do. Unfortunately, the weekend of the 7th of February in 2009 was particularly bad for bushfires, and this has come to known as Black Saturday, and 173 people died on that day due to bushfires. And after an analysis of what went on, it really became quite clear that this policy hadn't been followed. So what was the actual problem then? Well, the problem was that most of the population were adopting a wait-and-see policy. So waiting to see how the fire is evolving. Unfortunately, they were waiting until it was too late. The fire was too close, so they got trapped. Also, they were expecting more of a personal evacuation order to come from the emergency services. However, the emergency services were expecting people to follow the prepare, stay and defend policy or the leave early policy. And they were only issuing broadcasting general alert messages and not specifically targeted ones. So here there was a huge mismatch between the expected behaviour of the population and the actual behaviour of the population. There was also a mismatch in between the content of the information that was sent and what was relevant to people's needs, what they were expecting. So, looking at this then, there have been several studies afterwards that we went through during our literature research to try to establish the different profiles of people in this kind of situation. And from the literature, we saw that there are basically 7 profiles. The profile is listed on the left and an example on the right. So taking the first line, we have people who are known as can-do defenders. They typically want to defend their property. They have very good knowledge of the area. They have previous experience with fighting fires. They have the good skills, and they're very, very knowledgeable. So an example of this type of person would be a long-time local resident. If we look at the third line down, we also have people such as farmers or hotel owners, and they principally they want to defend their livelihood. They've invested a lot into their business and they want to defend it. So typically they are committed and they're well prepared year round. If we look further down the list, we have people such as threat avoiders, people who want to just avoid the threat. If there's any danger, that they will just leave. So they typically leave early. They're very conscious of the risk. They feel very vulnerable. And they plan to leave before there's any real threat to them. But they don't have any plan of what to do if they're caught by surprise. So a typical example of this would be, say, the head of a family who has several dependents. So it's their charge of looking after these people. Also, you have people such as reactors, and typically this would be tourists. So this is not all tourists, but the majority. Would be their profile. They are unaware of the risk, feel pretty unconcerned about it, don't really have any knowledge of what to do with it. Okay? So these that are coming out for the different people and how they behave during this situation. So our approach then was to use agent-based modelling and simulation to try and model and simulate the behaviours of these people. You're using agent-based approach. So an agent-based approach is a type of computer modelling where we're using autonomous agents. And each agent represents one person. So there's a mapping between the artificial agent and the person. And so in this situation, if we're using simulation, then it becomes a very, very powerful tool for us to maybe evaluate the policies of the evacuation procedures or the information that is being given to people. Because we're in a simulated environment, there's no risk to people. You know, we're not putting anybody in danger because of this. We can also run multiple experiments over and over again and analyse the results. So we can do things, we can experiment in this artificial world, and we can experiment where we can't experiment in real life. But we have to try to ensure that when we're modelling the behaviours, we're doing it as realistically as possible. And to do that, we were using an intelligent agent. I don't really like using that word because it's so loaded, the word intelligence. A cognitive agent, and we were using the approach of BDI, which stands for Belief, Desires, Intentions. So that each one of our agents, we could model their beliefs about the situation. So that didn't necessarily mean that it was fact, that it was true, but it was just what a person believed. They believed that the fire is 100 meters away. They believe the fire is 2 miles away. And we can model their desires, what they think they should do, and also the intentions, what they are going to do. And so this gives approach to be able to reason and select plans so that the agents can achieve their intentions. The good point about using this kind of approach is that it's really well grounded in philosophical theories. So in terms of explanations, it provides a good explanation because the ideas of different agents having different beliefs, desires, intentions, and behaving differently. The downside is that if we have a lot of agents, we have to be careful about how cognitively intelligent we're making those agents. because there are difficulties in scalability if we're trying to model, say, 1,000, 10,000, 500,000 agents. That becomes very difficult. And also, there's a lack of the tools and the methodologies that allow us to use this kind of modelling approach and to link it to simulation. So the methodology that we were using, or that we adopted, was something called TDF, for Tactics Development Framework. And originally, this was the methodology that was used with military personnel in military context, where they were trying to get information from military experts using interviews, just interviewing them. And we were saying, well, maybe we can adopt this methodology and use it to help us develop our system. So basically, it can be divided into three broad areas. First of all, it's a scenario-based methodology. So we're looking at defining scenarios at the beginning. Then we have a phase of system specification, where we're looking at identifying the roles of the agents, their particular goals and any particular sub-goals, the actions that they can do, and also the percepts from the environment. So information that the agent will react to or that is important to them. From there, we move on to the architectural design, where we're looking at grouping agents into their roles and going into detail specifying the interactions between the different agents. What kinds of interactions do they have between each other and between them and the environment? And then the last stage is a detailed design, where we go into even greater detail about the messages that are received and sent for this interaction. So, looking at the first phase then, we set out to develop a scenario of typical situations. And we could identify the actors of the scenario. So those 7 roles, those archetypes that we saw earlier, we can say, well, we can group our agents into one of those 7 roles. And we also have the emergency services as agents as well, because they're playing a role in distributing or providing the information. So if we were looking at the role of an agent, and here you'll recognise here that there was a threat avoider, there was a can-do defender, and there were the other categories as well. So here we can look at the things in the environment, the percepts in the environment that this role would look for. So they would look towards hearing a fire alert, or having an evacuation order, or be attentive to information about shelter, or about roads being congested. Okay? And then they have, so these percepts then are going to trigger these actions which take place. So this threat avoider can take shelter, can choose a route, can leave, and can use a secondary road. So we were looking at expanding all these percepts and actions for the different kinds of roles. So one of the things that we had to define, and I've only taken one example here, and this was the goal structure. So looking at establishing a goal for these different kinds of types, these different kinds of role. So this one is taken from a protect lives goal, which is at the top here, which is used for the threat avoider role. And here, using this methodology, we can say that, well, for protecting lives, the people would have to decide who they're going to take along and choose a destination and choose the route and go to the destination. So we can break down the goals into sub-goals, and we can put conditions on those goals as well. So we're also looking at this idea of grouping agents into the roles. So we have these 7 different profiles, but what was very, very clear is that these studies are showing that these profiles are not directly linked to demographics. So we can't say that people from the age group 18 to 25 are a particular type. Okay, that didn't come out at all. What did come out are things such as, well, if you're responsible for a person or for a group of people or for a child, then you might fall into the threat avoiders role. So typically mothers in that role would be threat avoiders. We also have this issue of context dependency, because in some contexts, I might be a threat avoider. For example, if my son is with me and I know that I'm the only one to defend him or to look after him, but if he's not there, then I may switch role and go from a threat avoider to maybe somebody who is really willing to defend the home and fight against fire. So this notion of role really does depend on context as well. And also, roles can change over time with the context. So you may start off being in one kind of role, but as time progresses and certain things happen, then you change your profile. So, looking at, as I said, into the second phase, we have how people are interacting, how agents interact with others. So that's either locally by exchanges, or maybe with their neighbourhood, the agents that are surrounding them. Or it could be distant communication by broadcasting messages. So we try to model and we try to simulate the interactions that we're seeing on social media, because that is a communication network. We also have to look at how agents are interacting with their environment. So if an agent does a certain action, then that has an effect on the environment. So, for example, an action to leave by an agent, if a lot of agents do that, then the roads are going to get very congested. So, looking at this is still quite early work, so we haven't got as far as the detailed design phase yet. We've mainly been concentrating on exposing these different profiles, trying to look at the characteristics of the different profiles and how they interact. So, wrapping up then on the conclusion. As I said, this is preliminary work. We're still in the early modelling stages. As a future application, what we were looking to use this for, because you have to define what you're going to use the simulator for, is really for the target, for the public, would be for the different people in the population to raise awareness of this idea of different profiles, and to raise awareness that you can wait until it's too late and then you will be trapped. So to be able to run the simulator and see what happens if you follow certain behaviors or certain strategies. So that can expose where maybe you would make an error in a real situation. Also, we could think about using it for risk managers as well, to look at how they could communicate information. Would it be effective if they targeted information to different groups, different profiles? So they provided different information to different profile people. Would that be more effective? And then going into the implementation side, we were looking to implement this once we finished the modeling in the Gamma platform, which is an agent-based platform. And also going even further, we're thinking, well, we're doing this work for Australia, but what about other populations, other countries? Are these profiles that we're seeing here, do they still hold for France or for Tunisia or for the States or wherever? And also the behaviours that we're looking at in our goals that we're identifying, does that just work for bushfires, or does it also work for earthquakes and floods? How generic can this model be? Where are the differences? Okay, so I probably raised more questions than I've answered there, because it's still very early. But, thank you for listening. Yeah.
Thank you, Julie, for this clear presentation. And are there any questions? I have, yes, share, please.
Yes. Two questions. First, regarding how should we consider your proposition? It is a simulation model, not yet implemented. This is, okay.
Yeah, it's basically, we're in the detailed modelling, so we're in the modelling stage. And typically what happens during this stage is that you're developing the model, you're making some assumptions about that model, but then you need to go back and check it with what the reports of the real situation, so in your model, before you can go on and start implementing it. So that validation actually for us plays a very strong role. We have to validate the model with observations, with data that's coming out from the reports, etc.
I found your presentation very structured. Yes.
Is that good?
Because it's very, yes, because it's a complex phrases description is a complex system.
Yes.
It's difficult to manage all the parameters, and you give a lot of recommendation on way to model that are very interesting. Just a question about your methodology. You make a picture. Could you, because with the scenario and the this one.
Yeah.
You mentioned before that you use the BDI architecture.
Yeah.
But where are BDI
it's hidden. It's actually hidden, really, in here where you're identifying your agents. As part of your goals, their roles, you're also identifying their beliefs, their desires and their intentions. So really the things like the desires and the intentions are included in the goal structure, because they have certain goals that they want to achieve as the intent, as the desires, and then they pick something that they're going to do, and then they have to develop a plan for that. So that's really their intention.
Another question. Except if there are some others. Don't you think, because what we say about BDI is it's something very heavy. You said that it could lead to a complex system and difficult to run, etc. And do you think in panic situation we have time to deliberate, because we
No, you don't.
we are reactive, and it is another architecture.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, you can model very basic reactive things, and so your agents are not really very cognitively developed or intelligent. But you can also, it gives you the flexibility to go the whole way. And so, yes, in these kind of situations, people do have strange behaviours where they think that they would be well prepared, that they would follow the rules, do all the procedures and everything. But in actual fact, they just completely freeze. And we've seen that on videos where people are just so confused about what's happening, they just freeze. And yet when you ask them afterwards, they would say, well, no, actually what I wanted to do was this. I know what I do, I know what I should do. but what I actually did was nothing. So, we have to try and take those behaviours into account here. So we're not at all assuming that everybody is behaving in the correct manner. You know, there is some flexibility in there to say that, yes, I know that if there's an earthquake, I should get under the table and then I should go to a safe area. But, you know, in reality, my first concern would be, where's my son? You know, to try and, so we have to put those behaviours, those realistic behaviours into our models. It's going to be realistic.
Any questions, please?
No, ladies first.
No problem.
It's just about
It's about the agent's role,
Mhm.
and I don't really understand how to define these roles, if they are related to the professions or which kind of characteristics are considered.
Yeah, it's these roles have come out from several studies where they've been looking at how people behave, and they say, well, broadly there are these profiles, and it's not necessarily so cut and dry, because over time we can change our profile. Our profile depends on the context, and also in the profiles there's some overlap as well. They're not completely separate.
So they will change
Yeah.
in another study that will be different.
Yeah, well, yeah, this is one thing where I was making the point at the very end, was saying, okay, we've got these profiles for human behaviour in bushfire situations in Australia. Are they going to be the same if we looked at fires in France? Or if we looked at tsunamis in Singapore?
And I don't know, but just yeah, because in some point we also work with roles of citizens and agents during emergency.
Yeah.
That would be the possibility to give like a general model of these behaviors,
Yeah.
and specify them depending on the different, I don't know, the different situation.
Yes, yeah. I mean, what's some work that we've done, which is not particularly to do with fire, it's actually more to do with earthquakes, but looking at human behaviours in the Lebanon, in Beirut, and also in Argentina and in France, where they have small tremors, but trying to look at how we could develop some kind of generic model where we could say, well, these behaviours are common in these situations, and these ones depend, say, on the cultural context or another context.
Thank you.
In fact, I have one remark and one question. So the remark is, for me, I didn't know about TDF before, but it looks like the works of groups about the subsumption architecture. Because you have a link between the perception and the action, so looks like
Yeah,
similar.
I haven't thought about that, but yeah,
Yeah.
it does look like that. It does look like a subsumption architecture. Where this actually comes from, it was a methodology that was used in military situations to try and get the tactics that military personnel would use in different situations. And this was the approach that they were using. So we said, oh, I wonder how this fits.
So it's not an academic work, it's not an academic method.
Yes, it was the people in
Yeah.
Melbourne, actually, that were doing this
It's more
work.
end user methodology.
Yeah, to try and get the information, or extract the knowledge from the experts, right, the military experts that were using it, trying to adapt it to what we wanted to do.
I was wondering, such complex system, or why do you didn't start to implement first a small model, very simple? Because maybe the model that you have done is not correct regarding the simulation output.
Yeah, I see Some people, I guess, do go that way. They go straight to the simulator and start coding and then say, well, let's go back and let's try and validate that. I think just historically in my work, I've always started with a paper model, and I've gone backwards and forwards between the reports and the experts to try and complete the model. But then I go to simulation and I start with a very, very basic presentation of the model, knowing that I've got a complete model behind it, and I can go into the simulator, simulating very basic behaviours, and then make sure it's okay with the model, and make sure it's okay with the experts as well. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the questions. The next speaker is Yangwei. So we are liaising and coming from Singapore, introduced himself and work. Multiple regression and artificial neural networks for the prediction of crop pest risks.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'm very happy to be here to present my research. Actually, this is part of my PhD pilot study, one of the pilot studies of my PhD work. The topic is multiple regression and artificial work prediction of risks. So, before I present the paper of this paper, go through the general context of my research, so you can get an understanding how I come up with this paper. My PhD's work is about quantity of geographic information. This is a term in my discipline, which is GIS, Geographic Information Science. And this term is coined by Professor Buchan in 2007. This is similar to those presented in this morning, like social media data or user-generated content, or you can also call it crowdsourced data. The characteristic of this phenomenon is the blurred boundary between the audience and the information presented to the subject. So the figure below the icons below are some examples of VGI. So the reason I study VGI is because it's cost-effective and it can be timely geographic data during emergencies, and both non-experts and experts can benefit from the phenomenon of VGI. So in my case, my study is running in a specific application domain, which is integrated pest management. Integrated pest management is a multidisciplinary pest management approach that is practical, effective, economical, and practical of both public and environment. So the figure below shows the general framework of my PhD work. It has three components, and the first component is data collection. We developed mobile applications and mobile platforms like SMS and mobile applications to collect VGI from the general public. And this is an example showing our collected VGI from India. Actually, our study sites are distributed in India, Southeast Asia, and China. And the second component is the data analysis component. We analyze the data, we make sense of the data, and also before that, we need to control the data quality of VGI, because this kind of data is different from traditional data sets. So the third component is information dissemination. After we make sense of VGI, we disseminate information to the users. So this is a web system disseminating the past risk prediction results based on BGI. So actually there are quite a lot of research questions regarding this design framework. There are also a few papers coming out regarding this framework. And in today's presentation, the research significance. My research is about not from what the other presenters presented, which are about immediate emergencies. Mine is more about a slow onset crisis. Pests is more related to food security, food emergencies, food crisis in the world. So managing pests and their damages to crops therefore has been one of the critical steps to prevent food insecurity and emergencies and to alleviate world food crisis. So in this study, actually the paper I submitted is a pilot study of my PhD's work. In general, this work aimed to gain insights into model selection for pest risk prediction, and in particular, it aimed to evaluate two pest modeling approaches in terms of their performance of pest risk prediction and their methodological advantages, disadvantages. So based on my literature review, I selected two models, which are multiple regression and artificial neural network. This slide shows the basic principles of these two models. Multiple regression, most of us I think are very familiar with this. It has multiple independent variables as the factors contributing to a given dependent variables. And for artificial neural network model, it consists of, in my study, I used back propagation artificial neural network. It has three layers. The first is the input layer. You should have the independent variables, and the output layer outputs the simulation results. Once an error is found in the output layer, then the neural network propagates the error backward to the input layer to retrain the data set by adjusting the parameters in the hidden layer. So this process continues until the errors is minimized in output layer. So this is the basic principle of these two models. So the study site is Singapore. I collected pest surveillance data in Singapore during the last decade for these two species. They are the mammal sheep and the diamondback moths. And this figure shows the time series during the last decade. We have monthly pest population data, and we also have monthly environmental variables related to these as independent variables. So the multiple regression modeling process, we used data collected before 2012 as training data set, and the data collected in 2012 was used as test data set. And the outliers were removed appropriately, and stepwise regression was performed for predictor selection, and Bayesian logarithm transformation was performed on the dependent variable to meet the assumptions of the regression. And the independent variables were Z-score standardized selectively to eliminate cognitive problems. Here comes the AN modeling process. Similarly, data collected before 2012 were used as training data set, of which 2012 were used as were randomly selected and used as an independent set of data records for tracking the errors, leading to overfitting problem. And second, following the universal approximation theorem, a suite layer backpropagation neural network consisting of one input layer, one hidden layer, and one output layer were adopted in this study. And the number of hidden neurons was determined empirically using a trial and error method. Next, The optimal learning rates and the momentum constants were all parameters adjusted based on the training efficiency and accuracy. And sigmoid activation function was used. And finally, all the variables were linear normalized prior to the model training. So here comes the result. This slide shows the modeling results by the regression modeling. For the first pass, there are three factors were identified being important to the dependent variable. They were Z-score standardized monthly maximum temperature and monthly mean temperature and monthly precipitation amount. For the second pass, the maximum temperature is identified being significant to the independent variable. For both species, we identified that temperature factor is important to the growth of the two pests. The figure below shows the prediction results in, using compared to the test data set. The black bar shows the actual outputs and the gray bar shows the desired outputs. Actually, I found that the result is not so good. They didn't match, the actual output didn't match the desired output very well. So I come to the results of the artificial neural network. It becomes much better. So based on a visual comparison, I found that ANN model performs much better than regression model in terms of the prediction results using the test data set. So the next step, I use three indexes to show the prediction results quantitatively, and this index are IMSE, MAE, and MAPE. The lower the values, the higher the prediction results. And I found that for all the index values of ANN model, they were lower than those of the multiple regression models. So this indicates that in terms of prediction performance, ANN model performs better than the regression model. However, I'm not saying that just saying that ANN model is always better than multiple regression model. So based on qualitative comparison, each of these two models has their advantages and disadvantages. I made a qualitative comparison based on 7 aspects. The first is the relationship model. For multiple regression model, it models linear relationship. But if the relationship is not linear, the systemic nonlinear effect and the polynomial relation can be mitigated by their transformation. For ANN, A models linear, nonlinear, simple, complex, or even elusive relationships. So in terms of this aspect, ANN is more flexible. However, in terms of factor interpretation, ANN performs like a black box. It cannot identify which variable is more important than to a given dependent variables as the regression did. Regression can provide us statistical evidence to show which variable is more important. And for assumed distribution, for MR model, it assumes normal distribution of data, but it can be mitigated by the data transformation. For ANN, it is robust deviation from multivariate distribution. Also, however, ANN model is problematic, is overfitting problem. But it is less problematic with state outliers. So ANN is more flexible in dealing with state outliers. And multicollinearity issue for ML model, we should be careful about multicollinearity problem. For ANN, it has no such concern. model parameter settings. For MR model, the parameters are derived statistically, so it's constant. It is more stable. But for AN model, the parameters used for constructing an AN model usually determined empirically. So different people may construct totally different AN models for the same data set. So in terms of model selection, we need to consider different aspects of the models, and we need to take into our goals of modeling into account. So actually, my PhD's work is more based on one-material geographic information. This modeling is based on traditional data set. So here, actually, I also did some work compare AN model with other models, and if the model cannot handle VGI data, other methods need to be developed. So there are more future work to do to handle VGI data set. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Yue, for this nice presentation. And we will have asked some questions. Are there any questions about this or tests, risks? Thank you. Okay, thank you. My question is about the choice of the two machine learning methods, multiple regression and artificial neural networks, because there are many machine learning methods, so maybe I think that you can test more methods on your data set and then try to find the best one.
Yeah, actually, I also have other studies compare other models. Also, develop methods to handle one-material geographic information. For this study, I focus on these two methods because I want to compare two typical models. One is from empirical statistics. The other one is more popular, very popular in artificial neural or machine learning. So that's the. Also, I have a related state of art written in the paper about why I choose this model, choose these two models.
Are there any additional questions?
Let me tell you first, I don't like neural networks because it just work and we don't know and it's just magic. So I've changed that and it worked. Okay, so you tell it yourself, so it's perfect. My question is, well, this is for Singapore?
Yeah, the data set was collected.
Well, I thought it was there are a lot of crops over there.
A lot of what?
Crops.
Crops. The data was collected in 8 farms from Singapore. There are many crops in Singapore.
Okay.
Small farms.
Yeah, I guess so. So my question is, when you want to I've been working with tests that was on the other side, was of the method approach. But my question is, you try to, just like in economics actually, you try to guess, just like in economics, you try to guess tendencies based on the past, predict. So the same kind of question. And my question is, the problem is economics and also past is external cause.
External cause.
Yes. you can maybe because it's a farm, you can expect that it's a closed environment. So you master all the what's it opposite of endogenous, exogenous reason which came from outside. If you have a farm and it's under a glass, you control every parameter.
I mean the parameters from outside the farms.
Yeah. Is it something you have been considering? Because maybe you can change the model.
Actually, this data are the average of the 8 farms, and we can see that most of the meteorological parameters in the modeling. But in fact, there's also other parameters that can influence the past growth. So,
because if you take the middle, you always reach the error margin. For example, just take my 100 and just thinking about just the middle of the use mistake. So it's mechanical. To a prediction easily, but maybe you can justify that the farms are in a controlled environment.
Yeah, that may be a reason why my proposal definition didn't perform well. So there are factors were not taken into account. So, but the purpose of this paper is not to make issues.
Discussion about what was the best potential to discuss. The main thing is that when you read my results, when you find the right equation with the right parameters to explain the past work, you can always add a psychological factor. So the question is it possible? Possible, or maybe have large. I think that maybe the question could be simplified by asking the question: "How going to be a risk-based proliferation? Proliferation? What did you say? Because if you just say, instead of trying to have precise figures, which is always tricky. To say, okay, I predict the risk will be that amount of rodents in 1 year. Maybe it's more easy to ask a hypothesis. And that, is there a rodent risk?
I think that is a way to go to collect such data to take into account in the modeling.
Sorry for the tricky question.
I have just a small question, please. Have you tried this prediction, and have you real data and to compare what is obtained with this predicted? Have you used this model for last year or for 1 year and observed what happened? We try to validate it by collecting data, not in the model, and to compare them to what you have obtained.
I only evaluate this model based on the actual data in 2012. After that, I didn't use this model to do more predictions.
So my question might be this: how do you see the way to apply it for predicting and for the giving to decision makers? And how this model, and when do you think this model would be useful in practice?
Actually,
Yes.
there is can see the data.
Because I understood you said that both methods have limits and have advantages and disadvantages. In a concrete way situation,
Yeah,
which one, you give two predictions, you give one,
Yeah,
which one to rely on, and so perhaps for future studies.
Yeah, if the modeler is focused more on identifying important variables, then regression models is better. And if a modeler is focused more on prediction, I think AM performs better. As you can see that for the paragraph for the first paragraph, there is past peaks, population currents peaks every year. So the model can be used to predict the period when period the past occurrence. So in terms of this, AM model performs is kind of better. Yeah.
Thank you very much for this, and perhaps we have a discussion during the coffee break. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now we have a short break. Yes. Have the coffee is rapidly and we'll be back. Always.
National Front votes profile they collect.
I didn't say that.
Yeah, interesting Yes.
Julie, you will send me.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
So you're working in Australia yourself?
No, Carol went over to Australia. She's got really strong contacts. She did postdoc.
I'm working a lot with Monash University.
Oh, okay.
I'm in disaster medicine. So wildfires, bushfires
Yeah.
is a very hot topic.
Do you know that, please?
Well, no, it's not really my field, but we have a presentation, the last one, on the disaster support system for disaster situations.
Yeah. Is this a European?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, but I'm in the health department. So,
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting.
yeah. And I see you doing on air pollution also.
Yeah, this is somebody else who I work with.
All right.
Killing lots of birds with one stone.
All right.
So I'm now presenting his work. So this is another collaboration. This is going on university in Algeria.
Right.
So they got a so
Who hasn't?
yeah, it seems like yeah, that's what
Okay, I'll leave your
Yeah, thank
but
you.
maybe we'll have a chance to.
in practice like that.
Yeah.
As to the center, the seventh back framework.
Yeah. Well, it was last year or the
Seventh.
seventh. But yeah, I have a couple of friends. I teach disaster medicine course in Monash. So
Yeah.
bushfires is really a hot topic every year.
Yeah. Yeah. Ah, bonjour. Je vous remercie pour l'exposé, je voulais bien apprécier. Ah, merci. Merci. Ah, avec Najas. Et je suis une chose Ah, oui, oui, oui. Ah, oui. Ah, merci. Ah, ja, super. Yes. Oh, d'accord. Maintenant, c'est plutôt fini. Parce que pour les étudiants, c'est plutôt en septembre, octobre. Mais oui, on a des projets sur la simulation et aussi le en préparation. Oui. Donc, les étudiants, par exemple, oui, bien sûr. Oui. Je sais pas si ils sont tous sur le site. Le site de... Oui, parce que j'ai l'impression qu'on a des étudiants qui nous approchent et on a dit oui, on a un sujet. Donc, les sujets sont partis un peu vite cette semaine. Mais non, oui, on a plein de sujets. Oui, bien sûr. Normalement, on a le sujet défini. Et après, on dit oui, on a ce sujet, ce sujet. Oui, oui. Ok, oui, c'est en Scrum MED. Ok, well, merci. I'm good.
Then can be more, for example, here, can we have eight one year? But we know important research in the latest. Yes, in the latest research.
Great idea. That's a great idea. Thank you. Thank you very much. I know I can write a report. I know what I'm writing. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. That's what we are talking about. I know that. That's artificial. That one, I understand that we have to do how to do it. We can work in the and also check this. Check. You have show the thing that you issue. You are the modern and the modern checklist. Thank you. Yes, I'm master of research, IT, IT master of research. Yes, I'm master of research. You, PhD student. And, it's about that subject. BGI. Yes, I say BGI. Social media thing. Yes, it's the first slide. The man was standing, you put YouTube something. You feel the slide quickly, you don't get on the slide. Like, social network, YouTube, I've seen some icons, and learning too quick. Too quick. We also we are not don't have the habit to listen to English. I understand. I can read English, but I can't listen. I can't speak. But I can read. I understand. I understand. I understand. English is for me. Actually, yes, try. Update information.
Hi. We have met before, but I just wanted to say hello. I'm Hossein, You know?
Oh, yes, you're Tina's
Yes.
PhD student.
Yes.
Oh,
How are you?
that's good.
It was a really nice presentation. Yeah, that one was really nice.
I want to go later as well.
Okay. And also, I wanted to ask about what are the differences? Because I have in the previous Scrum, if you remember, they were looking at simulating fire crisis during emergency. So what do you think that there will be a difference between your work and their work? Because they also made some kind of simulations and then presented kind of behavioral acts.
Yeah, I think what we're doing is a lot of bushfire simulations. They tend to work on the dispersal and the spread of fire.
Yeah.
So it's very much on the physical
Yes. Yes.
and the concentration is on that. Where we're saying, well, actually, no, in this like, big socio-technical system, what really is the concern is the number of people who are homeless, who have died, that we give them the right information at the right time. So we're focusing more on the social simulation and saying that, okay, really good physical models exist, but you know, we need to address this because what people do really will affect whether they live or die.
Yes.
So
Yes. Yeah.
So,
But you will also use that kind of physical simulation to enhance your.
I work in another area, not just crisis management, but I work in energy management as well. So looking at how energy is used in buildings, so prediction energy demand. And it's the same thing there. They have brilliant simulators, really, you know, they level of detail, they go into the door being open, they'll model it, you know, what the material of the walls is modeled. And they work absolutely perfectly until you put people in them. Because people like come in, they open doors, they turn on their computer, so it changes, they're in physically in ourselves. So what we've done there is we've done a social simulator, and then we couple it with their physical simulators and exchange data. It's quite a thing to do because they're working on completely different.
But it's I think it's really difficult. I assume it needs a lot of work.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, on the final day.
Okay.
Yes.
I have to reload on Friday.
Oh, really? No.
Yeah.
I thought. But you can still take a look.
Did you send me your presentation?
Yes, sure. Yeah.
That would be, yeah. Do you know my email address? It's probably around.
Yeah, I can find it. I can find it easily. Yeah, sure. Yes, I will send it to you. Sure. And then it will be nice. I will appreciate if you send me your comments.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So you're planning to come to ISCRAM 2016?
Yes, hopefully, but we have to see what happens. We are working on a long paper, and also I would go for a short myself.
Yeah.
So let's see what happens.
Yeah, the deadline's later for short.
Yes, and also I have my own issues with Mizo, and because I'm from Iran, and that's way it's kind of.
I just had a really bad experience because we had two PhD students. They've done a master's research in France. They've previously been in the UK where they had funding for a startup company. And they had their funding, they've got government funding. And me and Carol, who I talked about, we're going to supervise them. All going ahead with the last minute. The students have registered at the school. They've been there in the lab for the last 2 weeks. And we're just going to
And where were they from? Yeah, absolutely.
And I was so
yes,
so annoyed, really.
It happens.
Yeah, But for me, it was only, it's just the kind of circumstances. It could have been 2 years ago. No problem. Or even last year, maybe no problem. It's no negative. It was, we're working on rescuing drones.
But couldn't they actually appeal for that decision?
It's very hard with the French government.
Oh, yeah.
Once they decide something
No.
is
I can see.
sensitive, it's like, no, it's
No.
sensitive.
But
Yeah, I mean,
was it sensitive? It's
It was-
rescue is sensitive.
But they were using drones.
Oh yeah, drones. Okay,
So,
of course.
yeah, it was awful. As soon as they saw the word,
Yeah.
well, this is my perception. As soon
Yes.
as they saw the word,
Yes,
drones,
that's
they
how
were
it
like,
is. Yeah. Yeah.
And I was so annoyed. Yeah, and I complained. Yeah, yeah.
So that would be a case also for me for the Scrum 2016. So we have to see it's a kind of risky decision we have made, but let's see what happens.
Yeah, because it's the issue of the visa.
Yeah.
And I don't know how long we keep asking the organisers when we tend to take this, and they say, oh no, it's, it could be like easily within a month to get the visa. Because it's in the Olympic Games, they may do a fast track.
Yeah, yeah.
This exception.
Yeah.
For people for this year, well, 2016 year, so it might be just a visa waiver. We don't know yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, and also I have checked with the embassy in Norway, and then they said that Iran is among those countries that need a longer procedure for. So let's see what happens.
Yeah.
But hopefully.
Yes. Good luck.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. But I will send the
Yeah. I really like that.
Yeah. Thanks. Thank you.
Stephen Fry.
Yes, QI. Yeah. Okay, I know what you mean. I watch it a lot actually. I like that program.
Very by chance.
Yeah, it's a good program.
You don't know. Ah, we are live.
Are we? Oh, of course. Yeah.
Look at people watching here.
Yeah. Hello.
May I just check for a moment?
Of course, yes, you know.
Want to see how it looks.
Yeah, that's good.
Is your yes.
Okay.
Ouais. C'est prochain. Ça, c'est bon. Ouais. Non, c'est toi. Oui, c'est moi.
Ah oui, c'est pas. Non, c'est ah, demain alors. Si, attendez. Du coup, ils se vendent. En plus,
My lead
And very long questions.
several parts.
Ouais, several parts. If you understand what I mean, if you understand what I mean.
En plus, il y a un problème qui est de voir avec mon partie.
Ah bon?
Il y a eu un postdoc à Paris.
Serious game, hein?
L'impression des papiers, tout ça.
C'est le même sujet.
Ah oui, oui.
Ils amortissent la thèse.
Ouais.
C'est comme tout le monde. C'est comme tout le monde.
Ouais.
C'est commencer à rédiger quelque chose qui après va grossir et va devenir
C'est comme tout le monde.
Yeah.
So, ladies and gentlemen,
So we will continue with the same session on modeling and simulation, and we have still have two papers. The first one will be presented by Edward West, and the next will be with Julie again. So Edward, please, I let you introduce yourself.
Thank you. My name is Edward West. I'm working in Marseille, Aix-Marseille University, first university of France by alphabetical order. Don't say I told you that. Oops, I won't lie. So I'm going to present you the work of my PhD students who have made already at university, and it was a work which came from computer science companies. And I will not enter into too much details because you can find it in the paper, but maybe it can raise some questions, use of science games, good or bad management, and maybe have an interesting discussion about that. So, to summarize, this work is based on collaborative learning of collective procedures. I precise because to do this work, we work on e-learning, and among them, collaborative learning doesn't mean the same thing, and doesn't mean the same. So in crisis management, just take the general case, you have a crisis, people have to deal with this crisis, have many people with many roles, so each have responsibilities, specific missions, or good, bad, mission have been accomplished, and moreover, specifically is management. you will have interdependencies between these missions, meaning people have to work alone in the correct manner, but they have also to interact in the correct manner. So we have also individual consequences and global. So the best way to make people work together is to put them together in real life in a mock-up crisis management situation. Typically, let's pretend aircraft has crashed. This is funny, you can play with that. And so there are firemen, you have mayors, normal people, and we have to see if the procedures are well conducted. So this is a particular case when you have already procedures, behaviors, nominal behaviors, which are already defined. So most of the time, generally in France, you will have municipalities which conduct such kind of experience on site with real cars, with real maps and so on, with even mock-up conference presses, press conference, sorry. And this is usually complex because a lot of people are engaged. It is therefore expensive, but necessary. I insisted in writing necessary because the other solution, based on computer solving simulation, based on games, game simulations, are not an alternative to this real case situation where people are really predicting a car, really standing, really calling people to say there is an incident someplace, and releasing it, prepare it, and better learning. So this is not an alternative. But the advantage of computer science is you can have control repetition. If you're conducting in real time and somebody mess up something, you can have time limitations, so you can reduce every time. In computer simulation, something went wrong and start again. Simulated players can also allow small-scale experimentation. You can have players missing, so you can replace them with simulation. And the idea, the hope of serious games is to allow some kind of immersive situation, meaning people can pretend being in a real situation. So the project was based on serious game for training to crisis management. When we were contacted, the project was already advanced. They had already a first version of the software, and it was dedicated to non-professional and professional, meaning a fireman is used to receive orders or used to deal with catastrophe. But the guy which may be waiting at the city hall may not know all the procedures. So we have different kind of stakeholders. You can have professional stakeholders and non-professional. And the idea is to allow different kind of people to interact and to learn together. So they came to us, two companies, which started the project. At the beginning, they just wanted to have better simulation of non-playing character, NPCs. From our point of view, it wasn't that interesting in scientific terms. But as a case, we proposed a solution. And in exchange, we wanted to see our learn assessment, meaning how to evaluate if players did learn something or at what level, would be interesting, notably because of the collective character. So the scientific issues were heterogeneous knowledge, meaning people are there to learn many things. They have to learn if they know the correct words, or correct keywords, if they know what to do when something happens, and so on. And depending on the kind of knowledge, you don't model, you don't extract it from the players the same way. If you want to check that the people have done the right procedures, you will compare, for example, state charts, human state chart, or state diagram, thing like that. You're going to check they have done the right decision. You have to infer a learner model, just like in e-learning systems. Heterogeneous sources is also a problem because in messing the players in the game, you have to try different kind of information which doesn't come from they come from the database, they come from the real world, the mock-up real world in which they're playing, and they come from the players' actions. And therefore, you have to be able to assess differently the different kind of knowledge, and also take into account the collaborative process. We'll comment on that later. So, just to say, I will pass it fastly because we don't have an important contribution to agent destination because we just apply state-of-the-art solution, meaning PD-like solution, meaning agent having roles, goals, plan, and actions. Just meaning agents will select plans depending on the context. And associated to that, dialogue editors allowing to describe different kind of interaction. Because players will interact with other players in order to improve the make-believe situation. They must not know if they're talking to a real player, a human player, or an avatar, a simulated player. So therefore, in order to control that, the best way for the moment is to have selected keywords or selected sentences allowed to be used during the conversation. So we are not in this situation. We haven't considered, for example, real-time direct discourse analysis, abstractions, and so on. This can be a Turing test gameplay. So the principal subject was distributed and heterogeneous assessment. Assessment actually came from e-learning, intelligent tutoring system, where we want to know if the learner did learn his lesson. The problem is, in e-learning system, you have the question, you have the expected answer, you should check, is it right or not? I simplify things, but most of the time this kind of thing. You have individual tasks which have to be learned. When you are having collaborative learning, most of papers deals with learning like a class. You have several groups of students who are working together collectively, but they are learning the same thing. They are learning that math lesson. Here, the premise, each learner has its own learning objectives. And moreover, these objectives may be in interaction with other learners. So we have to check that the learner individually learns the correct thing and did interact correctly with the other players. So we formulated that multi-skill assessment. Actually, something we've been studying in other case with negotiation in other case. And learners can interact differently. And as we are in this game, learners can play. They can drive a car to go to the accident site. They can pick up the phone. They can pick up a fax and so on. So we have to be able to track all the information. So in order to deal with these different metrics, different assessment methods, depending on the learning, the knowledge we are assessing, we propose this concept of evaluation spaces. base of knowledge, indicators, metrics, and assessment methods. The idea is to have an evidence space is a way to arrange homogeneous spaces, well, knowledge of the same kind, data of the same kind, in order to have kind of generosity. So knowledge representation describes a kind of knowledge in a large sense, meaning because if you're just dealing with that data, you cannot call that real knowledge, but you can have data, data from the simulated world. We want to know the size of the crisis. We may try to deduce knowledge based on the actions of the players' actions. Indicators will help building information about how the players are interacting, are playing with the game. And assessment metrics will allow translate that quantitatively, whereas assessment methods will translate these indicators into scores, into marks, if you want. And to answer one of the questions during the reviewing process, there is also the possibility, which hasn't been addressed, but it's open, to go to, I'm looking for my words. Fuzzy logic, yeah, it was a bit fuzzy in my head. So fuzzy logic can help avoiding the problem with a specific quantitative. For example, if somebody has 9.98, he may be considered as having not validated the test, whereas, well, come on, just the same. So to give an example, in the space modelization, in the SIM4 experiments, we have considered 3 different spaces. Physical space, which represents the virtual world in which the players are playing, and behavior space, which represents the dynamic behavior of the players, and social space, which describes the collective part. So physical space is quite basic. To put bluntly, I had a bad reaction one time. We can just measure in the virtual world how many dead people by playing calls. If they didn't interact rapidly, there is a fire in the virtual world, is hitting buildings and people there can die. So you can say, okay, the exercise wasn't really well conducted because you have 10 dead on the table. So this is basic information resulting from agents, players' actions during the game. So behavior space is just having some expected behaviors, and we try to track the players' action and compare what they've been doing to what was expected. And choose space is a tricky part, where we want to try to measure how well players have been interacting. So if we go back from the different space, the kind of knowledge, from the physical space, just data. From the other space, we have plans, behavior, state diagram, activity diagram there. And from social space, we have social networks measured through the number of interactions which have been going on between the players. So these are the data, the information, which are aggregated, transformed through indicators, and then producing assessments. So we have a progressive aggregation of information, which in the end help to produce a score, an assessment score. Excuse me. So this is an example of assessment of a mission assessment. The idea is to have a general framework, to be able to detail every measure thing we want to measure, and to have aggregation process, which in turn give a mark, a score. So you have, for example, is the players respected the action orders. So our mission is, for example, send information about the crisis, and we have to check that the right people have been contacted, in good order, and so on. So every piece of action is evaluated, is assessed, and finally, they build up a general score. If we look at, okay. If you look at the social assessment, problem is just like the behavior assessment. Question is, how do we measure interaction? The easiest way is to have a reference model, and you can check how much you digress from this model. So the approach was based on coupling computation. The coupling was based from works which wanted to compare cultural differences between firemen, mission execution in US and France. So they want to know who were talking to who and how long during an operation. So the idea is to have a domain model with a reference model saying this is the correct order of interaction. These people should talk to these people for a certain time. And this allows to build a reference model. And on the other side, we'll have the learner model, which is based on the real actors or a mix of real players, human players, and avatars interacting together. And we compare what differences exist between the reference model and the learner model. So rapidly, this is the software architecture which has been implemented. I've got 2 minutes left, so I won't linger on that. Just say that we define the simulation part on the right and the evaluation part, and all these modules are designed and implemented through agents. So to validate our experiments with the approach, we have taken a crisis scenario based on the transport of dangerous material, where a truck have an accident and there is some petrol which is spilling over the road and which may be dangerous. The experiment was simple: 4 people, 4 students actually, with a decision center, mayor, prefect, and sub-prefect, and they were not specialists of crisis management. And we tried to study the action during the scenario, and afterward we put a form and see how much they have learned. Of course, the second time they learned a bit more, but it was interesting to compare the results on the forms and the results which we obtained with the different computation I've alluded before. Just to show an example, you have here below an example of action sequences followed by the different actors, which give an idea of the different actions which has to be realized by different actors. So in conclusion, and I'm late, we have proposed a distributed assessment because based on different skills and based on agents, collective assessments, which can be improved, applied to crisis management with promising results. The perspective we have considered are to improve the qualitative assessments. Right now, we can see who has been talking to who, how long, but we do not address specifically in the collective assessment what and how they were interacting. We can check on the individual way, did the person did ask the right question, but we don't have the collective assessment taking into account the what and the how. Of course, extended experimentation must be conducted. And I already have another application of this approach on rodent control, where the same problem of having multi-skills assessments required, and how to deal with that with negotiation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone, for this presentation. And we collect some questions if they who have questions. Well, please.
Just a quick clarification, really. On slide number 8, where you were talking about the indicators. Oh yeah. Do you take into account the number of correct actions as an indicator?
Yeah.
Do you give one?
On this one?
Yeah.
Maybe not on this one.
Action
efficiency.
efficiency.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just a ratio. These are indicators, meaning in order to tell if the action was conducted, there must have been some computation before.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. I just wanted to check.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. We have another question, please.
I'm not sure you understand the answer that I'm asking. So how do you compare your two models between the reference model and the real model?
In the collective system?
Representing the interactions. So,
yeah.
How do you do the comparison?
Actually, it's a matrix. It's a matrix which contains and evaluate between 0 and 1 the strength of the coupling between two actors. And we do that for every actors. So we have nothing on the middle, the diagonal. And this is, and the difference tells if, for example, a strong coupling was expected here, but was not seen during the game. So we have a negative difference here, meaning the idea was that last year in Toulouse there was a question about debriefing, and talking about automatic debriefing is always touchy, because just like in psychology, debriefing is part of the process. So the idea is not to replace debriefing, which is always necessary, because it gives time to people to ponder, to think, to express their feelings. The idea is to guide the debriefing. Therefore, we can see, okay, we see that these two actors should have been talking more. We don't know what should have been asked specifically here, but we know they should have been talking more. So this can be a guide to debriefing.
I see that. Thank you.
Thank you. My question is about behavior simulation.
Yeah.
I mean, when you simulate the behavior of actors, how do you take into consideration the emotional factor?
We don't. Actually, we don't. We should.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which can influence
Yeah.
the action of actors.
This is something which can be interesting. Well, first of all, if you want to simulate crowd behaviors, for example, but it's actually at the beginning of the work, because when you start to work, you have a lot of ideas, and then you choose. The idea was maybe we can put avatars or false players doing wrong thing voluntarily, just to see if the real human players noticed that this is not wrong. So, for example, in that case, we could have emotional behaviors, and people running away instead of calling, and the idea to have to check, have you noticed that, and to see if the players have taken into account. Emotion can be taken into account either in simulation or in evaluation, but I'm not so sure about that. But actually,
I just have a question about this social interaction. How do you build the reference model? If you have this multi-domain model, how to get this as a reference model to compare?
I thought we agreed this question wasn't.
It is really to context
It's always the same.
dependence.
In this kind of work, you have two problems. It's always a validation. You propose methods, and you say, okay, we consider that the guy validated or the girl validated 80% of the game, so it's okay. You can go on real life doing the same thing. And the other problem is the reference model. So reference model in that case is we have the dialogue. We know there should be exchanges, this kind of words, and the question is how much time. So we have to put some hypotheses. This can be solved different. This was initial data to test. You can always build reference model from experience. You take real experts and then make the game, and then this performance can be a reference for the next part. Actually, at the beginning of the work, what we wanted to do was to be able to detect good results, but also to be able to say this kind of behavior, it is typically this kind of behavior, and be able to propose specific solutions.
Yes, precision perhaps. Considering the indicators, could you show us?
I know I shouldn't put this one.
So, it seems that the indicators are about each role taken individually, but not about the coordination. I am right or not?
What do you mean?
I mean that the indicators is to measure the performance or the efficiency of an actor taken individually, but
yeah,
yes,
yeah.
We don't have indicators about the organization.
This is actually this is related to the behavior space.
Yes.
So this is to check if individually
yes.
the player has conducted the right mission. So this is, but actually you can have some collective information built in. For example, if you send a message, you want to check the message sends the right message. So, but it's not explicit; it's implicit.
And it could have a consequence on the efficiency of the research.
We may detect the problem from this point of view and from the collective point of view. This is a part of the explanatory possibility to help, to guide, to say this is the error I've noted, and to be able to give sense to this error.
Could help to identify some collective metrics, organizational metrics. What are the questions? What are good?
Okay. Difficulty is the companies which we've been working with. One has nearly closed and stopped the mission, and the other one don't want to do research anymore. So we miss opportunities to further this work.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions? Thank you very much. And now we have, yes, Judy, again.
I'm working hard this afternoon. Shall I? Yes, okay. Okay, right. Hello again. It's me. This time I'm going to talk about a collaboration that's been going on with the university in Algeria. And okay, thanks. Yeah, so this is a collaboration that's been going on between Sabri Ghazi, Tariq Kadir, and myself, from University in Algeria. And we're looking at modelling PMT. I'll explain what PMT is here a bit later on. Crisis peaks using a multi-agent-based simulation, and it's applied to a particular case of Anbar city in northeast Algeria. So first of all, I'll start talking about air pollution and why that is a crisis now, why it's heading to really unacceptable levels, and the parts that humans have to play in that, in air pollution. We'll then look at the approach that we're using, which is actually, it's a combination of approaches. There is one part that's a multi-agent system in there, but also we have an artificial neural network and dispersion models as well. And the multi-agent system is really more for the decision-making mechanism. We'll then look at a simulation scenario, and then I'll finish up with some results and the conclusion. Okay, so air pollution. It's becoming increasingly important as being a major problem in many cities in the world. It's got a very important social and economic aspect. If we look at the number of people who die because of air pollution, who have time off work because of air pollution, etc. So really, we can consider this as a slow onset crisis that is happening. So under certain conditions, certain climatic conditions, the concentration of the air pollution becomes alarming. It's the peak periods that are the most worrying. And those peak periods occur when the concentration of air pollutant exceeds certain levels, so certain established levels. And a particular thing that we look at is PM10, which is particular matter. So the PM is for particular matter, and the 10 is for the aerodynamic diameter of the particles that are in the air. And they can include organic and inorganic particles. PM10 concentration is affected by many factors. They can be natural, such as the climatic conditions. If there's not been any rain recently and there's been build-up of PM10. Or it could be topographic conditions, for example, the shape of the surrounding environment. It can also be man-made. For example, with vehicle emissions and industrial activities will contribute greatly to the concentration of PM10 in the atmosphere. So simulation here could be a good help in managing the crisis of air pollution peaks by playing with different decision-making mechanisms, strategies. So in terms of human decision, the first line is really basically saying, yes, it's our fault. Okay, pollution in urban region is mainly caused by our activities, whether that's industrial processes, treatment of waste, traffic, or whatever. And those sources are really controlled by us. The thing is that current air pollution models and simulators don't tend to incorporate any of that decision-making factor. They tend to concentrate on the physical aspects of the air pollutants, so the concentration and the dispersal. And so we have very good models of concentration and dispersal. But our objective here in this work was really to combine the prediction model with a dispersal model, and also include or try to play with some of the decision-making activity, try and look at different strategies, for example. So the architecture that we were using, I'll explain this bit, At the bottom, you have the source controllers. So those are agents. So as a source is modeled as an agent, and the agent controls the amount of their activity. Okay, so imagine it's a factory, is a source, and it's control, the agent-based control of the level of pollutants. So depending on their actions, those will be the emission sources, which will contribute to the emission rate. Then that is fed into a dispersal model, which gives us the pollutants dispersion, and then that is fed into a prediction model, which is actually a neural network. Okay. From the prediction model, we can get the concentration of pollutants in the atmosphere. Then, because of a certain concentration, we may have some regulation and control mechanism. So maybe there's a central authority that says, no, everybody, you're polluting way too much, you've got to reduce everything. So there's some aspect of regulation and control, which we could look at if we're looking at a game theory kind of way, as some kinds of rewards and penalties. So they're either rewarded for their behaviour or they're penalised for their behaviour. So then that affects their decisions and their actions, so we go round the cycle again. So that's the basic architecture. So the artificial neural network and the dispersion model. Basically here we use a Gaussian model to compute the concentration according to the position, the emission rate of the source and the wind speed. Okay, so basically that's what that very pretty formula down at the bottom is saying. The artificial neural network then gets as its inputs values of the dispersal of the pollutants, the wind speed, the relative humidity, and the temperature. So that is fed into the artificial neural network, and that gives as output a prediction of the maximum value of the concentration for the next 24 hours. So it gives the peak of that. So in terms of the decision-making mechanism, so what each of the pollutant source controllers has to decide. Those are controlled by, well, we model them as software agents, autonomous software agents. And those agents we consider as plates. So here we're moving towards game theory. And they have two possible actions. Three. They can either increase their production and their emissions, they can decrease it, or it could remain the same. So we then compute the reward for the source, given what it has done in several time steps previously, and also what its neighbours have done. So the each pollutant source controller is going to keep a trace of the last K rewards earned from their game, round in the cycle. And also, what are the rewards of its neighbours as well, who are polluting the same chemical, so PM10 in this case. So it takes into account what the source is doing, plus what its neighbours are doing as well. And then the agent is going to compute its probability of increasing or decreasing its emission based on that. So for this we use a scenario-based approach. And the scenario is pollution in Annaba city, which is in the northeast of Algeria. It's got a particular topography, it's bowl-shaped, and that gives it certain problems in terms of pollution. There are 800,000 people in that area, and it's very concentrated with industrial activities, petrochemical and steel industry there. There are 6 main industrial zones, which are actually close to urban areas, so that's causing problems. And there's also important road traffic pollution, especially during the summer season, where there are holidays, there are lots of people travelling. It's not raining that much, so the pollution hangs around in the air. So we have a picture there. Okay. So in terms of the simulation scenario, we use a data set of 2 years. 1 year is used for training of the model, and 1 year was used for validation. So we use a separate data set for training and a separate data set for validation. In terms of the things that we can change for the input to the simulation, we can change the number of sources. So if we imagine that they're factories, petrochemical factories, we can change the number there, it's been set to 100. We can change the maximum emission rate, so that's the number, the level per hour that is allowed in the atmosphere. We can have a goal level that we want to go to, and we can change also the number of memory steps that's taken into account. So what has happened in the previous, in this case, 4 decision steps. We can also set the proportion of cooperating agents, and I'll say a bit more about that in the next slide. And we can say that at the beginning we're going to have 50% of cooperating agents. We've also got some environmental parameters here that we can change. I'll explain just a bit about the number of boxes, which is not quite intuitive. The number of boxes, the airspace is basically modelled as a cube. So it's the number of cubes in this space. So it depends on what size you have. So then in terms of the simulation scenario, we can say, well, what would happen if we had a centralized strategy where we have a central agent, say some pollution authority, that cares about the level of PM10 and that coordinates with the people who are polluting to either penalise them or reward them. So that's a centralised strategy. We can have a cumulative penalising strategy where the agents are penalised according to their PM10 concentration, or we can have no penalising. So the agents could do what they want there, they're not specifically penalised, or we could have no cooperation, where the agents only maximise their emission and there are no rewards or other penalties. Okay. So this here, you can't really, unfortunately, see much in terms of the detail on here, but you can see we have a simulation steps, and then we have a PM10 column, which is the amount of pollutants in the atmosphere. We also look at other polluting chemicals as well in our simulation. But if we try some results with this in terms of comparing those different strategies, we have a base level line which is in black, it's the black dotted line, and that's showing the maximum value that's allowed in the atmosphere for that particular polluting, so PM10 maximum level. And then we can see the top red line, that's looking when there is no cooperation at all. So that is the worst case. It's when there is no cooperation, it's hideously polluted. NP, which is the light blue line just below, is where there is no penalisation. And then the dark blue line, this is quite interesting, it's the darker blue line. That is a centralised strategy. So a centralised, what this is saying is that a centralised strategy will bring the levels of pollution down to an acceptable level. But what we see is that the cumulative penalising, which is the green, brings it down more quickly. Okay. So these are some just first results of those experiments. What we think, though, is that this simulation could be a valuable tool in helping us to experiment with what is the best way to control pollution levels. And in particular, we're mixing different kinds of things. We're mixing artificial neural networks we're mixing multi-agent systems. And so that throws up a whole new discussion about how we do simulation in general, and the different kinds of techniques that we use and what to use them for. So here then, we've used simulation to investigate different controlling strategies, and we can see how this regulation does have a big effect, whether it's centralized regulation or whether it's cooperative regulation. So the current version, we really here, we're focusing a lot on PM10 because that is one of the biggest problems in pollution. In future, we aim to look at some continuous sources. At the moment, we're only looking at point emissions. So for example, a factory that is in position coordinates X, Y, and it's polluting, and there is another factory over here. We don't look at the continuous sources, which are roads, which are distributed and they change more dynamically. We also need to enhance, as you could see, our interface. It was quite basic, but it would serve to make it, I think, more acceptable and more understanding if we had a GIS kind of interface there and incorporated that aspect as well. The strategies that we've been modelling here, they're based on game theory, you can see that. So they're quite basic. We could go a lot further in terms of our decision making that people have. Okay, so that's the end of the presentation. Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Judy, for this clear presentation. And we will see if we have a few questions before we leave and close on the first day. Everybody a bit tired. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Okay.
Before.
Thank you very much. I think that you presented an interesting approach. Of course, there is one main problem from a medical health point of view, toxicological point of view, of course. PM10 is, of course, a very bad measure for pollution, air pollution. First of all, it's an old measure. It dates from studies from 40 years ago. So at least I should use P 2.5 micron, not 10 micron. And studies indicate that nanoparticles, for example, let's take diesel exhaust. 80% of diesel exhaust is nano. Of course, in the beginning, after a couple of meters, it's dynamic, it's chemical, incredibly reactive. So choosing only PM10 is, of course, a very, very small basis to simulate air pollution. So it's a bit, of course, you mentioned it that you would go to other parameters, but let's say ozone pollution combined with particulate matter in the air is a big source of these health risks that you have with air pollution. And also the physical-chemical characteristics of these particles are very important. So I see that you have a steel factory and oil industry. So the characteristics of these particles are very, very, very different. Now you can imagine that particles with the same size, if they are cotton, or if they're cadmium, or if they're carbon, the health effects are, of course, very different. So I think to make something interesting from a health point of view, from a health crisis point of view, you should take into account, let's say, these health matters that has nothing to do with the modeling itself.
Okay. Yeah. It's not
with
really
the approach
to do with the approach. It's
I take such a quite interesting.
Yeah, I take your point.
Thank you very much. Another question? I have one question. About your strategies, the 4 strategies, centralized one and so on. How do you decide how to choose them? Why this you have at the end? You said perhaps we can start other ones. Why do you begin with such strategies? Are there field works or kind of?
Yeah, there were field works that were saying that it is possible to have a centralized strategy where you have a government agency, for example, that's controlling the amount of emissions around. So that is based on more or less real life, really. In terms of the cooperating agents, I think that was just saying, well, let's take a really distributed approach here. Let's assume that there is no centralized controller, and that we all have to take part in, you know, reducing pollution as much as we can.
We are all producing.
Yeah, yeah. And in some ways, these are very reminiscent of game theory, prisoners dynamic kinds of things. But we could get more intricate in our modelling, really. One of the areas that we could get more intricate and more detailed is, at the moment, they just have the option to increase or decrease their emissions. What actually would happen in practice would be that if they were penalised for a certain period of time, then some of the factories would say, well, actually, we're going to change our technology. So that would include an additional investment, whether they could afford that, but in the long run, their emissions would be lower. So it's not very realistic at the moment, because we're saying, okay, you can either increase or decrease. But what would take the decision that, okay, we need to invest more in pollution reducing technology. So we could go to that level.
Another question is about you are comparing the farm strategies.
Yeah.
And the graph shown with which how this result is according to the parameters you've chosen, for which scenario, which experimental configuration.
Yeah,
which gave you this, and how do you expect, or have you tested with other parameters and to have the same? Because here we can easily say the red is better. You know.
Yes.
So there is no intersection at all.
The result of this is the parameters that I showed in the simulation scenario. So it's these ones here. We did try with other ones, and yes, we tried with other ones, and we also did a sensitivity analysis as well. Yes. But these, I think, were chosen because this was the scenario that we were using, and these were the results that we.
Okay.
My question will is not really compliant with your assumptions, but it is just to discuss. In reality, factories have power.
Yeah.
They could decide, for example, to make to go away in another country where they can make pollution and so on. And it's just for the town. How do you, the rewards are not contained?
What we say to an economic simulator as well. So take into account, okay, it's heavily polluting what you're doing, but actually you're bringing in a lot of money to the local economy. And what would happen if, for example, you didn't pollute at all because you were going to another country, or you reduced it because you were investing in new technology? What would that actually do to the local economy? So I think more generally, this is an issue of simulations in general. What do we include in our simulators? Typically, I work in another area as well, which is in energy management, so predicting energy flows. And in that area, they absolutely purpose of a physical simulator of buildings. And it works, everything works very, very well precise. We can anticipate the demand that's needed. And it works perfectly until you put people in. The fact that we're all here, we're generating heat. I've got my computer on, there are a few other computers on. It's a bit hot, people start opening doors, walking in and out. So I think that really demonstrates that you can't just consider one simulator on its own. You need to link them and you need to consider more things if you're going to get any realistic results. So that's my feelings about simulators.
Okay. This one.
It's when it's working.
Yeah.
Was off. Actually, what you're showing is typically liberal. I mean, I don't want to be political, but you're just setting the idea behind. In a whole life, I was a student in economics, and in liberal economics, of course, all the economics, and they were talking at the time about the pollution market with the right to pollute. And I find some similitude showing let's make the market decide and the price regulate.
Yeah.
So, I was wondering if there was some, it would be interesting looking into that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because at the beginning I didn't pay sufficient attention. I thought there was normal people. And when you say penalize, it was just maybe a theoretical idea. If I put, I thought you say 100 or 200 agents.
Yeah. Yeah.
So therefore, I guess it can represent companies, and that way you can have taxes depending on the. And this is typical.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about the agent part because it's simplest behavior, but it made me think about current conduct simulation of agents for economics.
Agent-based
And
computational economics. ACE.
Found the framework about that.
Yeah.
I think it was him or
Yeah.
bachelor, I don't remember. So maybe there's something to.
Yeah, I mean, there's a big group in the States. Exactly.
They called it,
Kind of States.
it's not econometrics, that's already artificial economics.
Artificial economics.
Yeah.
This is the agent-based computational economics.
It might look like that, because actually you're just putting the micro in economy, you have macro approach where you have big equation, and when it doesn't work, you put a psychological factor and it's okay.
Yeah.
And microeconomics, you will have individual behaviors, and you observe, just like in the intelligence system, you observe the emergence of behaviors globally. So maybe there's some link kind of application.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I think, to get some meaningful results in, we would need to model more of the economic issues in there. And also things at the moment, we're just really assuming that each of the sources is just producing something and there's pollution going on. There's no notion of competitiveness and how that affects this model as well. So, I mean, we could put those in, we could put things like coalitions in, we could put competition, the effect of investment,
and
the effect on...
And mafia tricking the
Yeah,
pollution
you know,
market.
you could actually, there has been a simulation of that.
I was thinking about the question about the PM10.
Yeah, yeah.
But actually, maybe you don't have a choice considering the data you.
Yeah, the data that we have is basically
Because
2 years worth.
it's area, so maybe you could.
But probably you could have data about hospital admissions, because they are very much linked with air pollution.
Yeah.
For exacerbations, number of myocardial infarctions, epidemiological data. If you could link them, then you would have, of course, an interesting.
I mean, if there is a link, then we can work backwards. So then we can look at the patient data and maybe infer what pollution levels were from that at certain times.
Yeah.
I think in general, just getting data for these kinds of simulations is problematic. And we never have enough data and we never have the right kind of data.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay, if we don't have any more questions, I'd like to thank you for this first day, and we will meet tomorrow. We will begin at 9, and again we will go to